KHTS 98.1 FM and AM 1220. This is the City of Hope show on your hometown station, KHTS. I've taken a few weeks off, but not because of you guys. But we have Mandy Eglseder here. Yes. Mandy Eglseder. Dr. Dortha Chu is here as well, breast surgeon for the City of Hope. We also have, again, Mandy Eglseder's here, as she is most weeks, unless she's getting married. In which case you do not come, which is
I watched it on Facebook Live.
Good enough. Oh, did you? Okay, good. Good reason not to show up, I guess. This is the City of Hope show. City of Hope here in the Santa Clarita Valley. You can go to cityofhope.org to learn more information. But Mandy, I'm going to let you're the Physicians Relations Liaison.
Yes.
And we're going to let you have the floor. What exactly is City of Hope for those people that do not know that live here in the Santa Clarita Valley?
For those who do not know, City of Hope is a comprehensive cancer care. It's one of 43 comprehensive cancer care centers in the U.S. We have our main mothership located in Duarte. However, what we've been doing is extending ourselves locally to the community. So what that means is we here in Santa Clarita have a community clinic where we offer gynecologic oncology, breast surgery, other surgical oncology, so urologic oncology and your regular urology, medical oncology, you name it, clinical trials. So it's all accessible in the community of Santa Clarita so that when someone is diagnosed with cancer, they can be treated locally. They don't have to drive from Santa Clarita all the way down to Duarte. They don't need that freeway therapy. Our doctors,
which sometimes isn't therapy at all. Yeah. So,
and our doctors are privileged at the local hospitals too. So Henry Mayo and Providence Holy Cross, your surgery is happening there, so you don't have to drive.
Yeah, and it makes it when you're dealing with something like this, it makes it certainly much easier when you can stay here in the community. Dr. Dortha Chu is joining us, and she is the breast surgeon over at the City of Hope. And so I'm wondering. So do you just do, I guess the majority of what you do would be cancer related, right?
Pretty much, yeah. I think I would say about 80 to 90% of the patients that I see are have a cancer diagnosis either now or have had one.
Okay.
But I also do a lot of high-risk screening for patients, so that involves genetic screening or family history screening, and monitoring of those patients. And then some of the more complicated non-cancer related breast diseases, I'll take, I can be helpful with that as well.
Okay, so it's not, and not necessarily, but breast cancer is kind of your expertise.
Correct.
Which is a good reason that you're at City of Hope. So,
kind of worked out that way.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe for those, you've been on the show before.
Yes.
Maybe give a brief history of Dr. Dortha Chu, real quick. Maybe the Cliff Notes version, because we've done the deep dive before. But maybe just a brief overview. Who are you? Where are you from?
Sure.
Where'd you go to school? Your worst fears, all that. No, we don't need to talk about that. No, just maybe a Cliff Notes version of Dr. Dortha Chu.
Sure. Well, I grew up in the Bay Area and did college at Berkeley, but I went to Washington University in St. Louis for my med school and trained at UC San Diego. So got back to California as quickly as I could. Okay. For the last 10 years or so, I've been practicing in California. I was in the Central Valley for a while, and about a little over a year and a half ago, I joined City of Hope, where now I'm the breast specialist here for Santa Clarita and Mission Hills area. And
so the question I always ask is, this is a area of medicine that is pretty difficult to be a part of, in my humble opinion, and because cancer diagnoses are very bleak sometimes. There's people, and it's a very scary word. Cancer is a very scary word. What made you? What led you to this area of medicine?
I do agree. Cancer is still a very scary diagnosis for patients, but cancer is sort of a pretty, kind of a big term for a lot of different diseases, really. And we've actually had great success in treating the majority of them. These days, if you look at cancer across the board, just cancer with a capital C, about 2/3 of patients that are diagnosed will survive their cancer. Oh, wow. And then depending on the type of cancer, it's even better than that. And breast happens to be in the survival rate greater than 90%. And we're really 95% or higher for the early stages. And so contrary to some of the other ones that may be quite not as successful, the majority of my patients will live and will survive their cancer and will go on to live a great tremendously wonderful life, I hope. So for me personally, it's an opportunity to be a part of hope rather than necessarily looking at what a devastating disease that it is, and it still can be, but that there is an opportunity here to be able to get people over it.
And so I want to talk about that a little bit, because we were talking about big news is some genetic testing that can be done. But how has it changed? How has maybe specifically to you, breast cancer?
Sure.
I remember when I was a kid, my grandmother had breast cancer, and I don't know exactly what it was, but it was it was double mastectomy right away. Which is what ended up happening, and I don't know all the details, but that seemed like the go-to for a little while. How has it changed over the course of your career?
Sure. Well, when I would say even 20, a little over 20 years ago, which doesn't really even sound that long ago, to be honest with you, the only treatment really was basically surgery. You know, we sort of did whatever we could physically to remove it. And oftentimes that left patients with devastating physical changes afterwards. The other problem was we didn't have very good diagnostic testing then either. So patients wouldn't even be able to be diagnosed with a breast cancer until it was quite advanced.
Oh, holy cow.
So we were sort of, there were limitations on both sides, both in terms of diagnosis and treatment. Well, in the last 20 years, we have made tremendous advances in terms of understanding cancers, certain ones more than others, but overall, we just have gotten better understanding of cancers. But even more so, we've got a better understanding of how cells function at a very basic level. And that's allowed us to identify areas and steps where we can intervene, and that then translates into treatment for cancers. So these days, fast forward 20 or so years, surgery is still part of the treatment, but now we can do less surgery and get better results, both cosmetically as well as for their treatment. But now we have other options. We have radiation, which also has gotten better and better and more limited, with, again, less with more success. Even medicine treatment, chemotherapy is still a staple. We still use medications to help us treat cancers of varying types, including breast. But we've now gone beyond just the ones that we think of as poison, where it makes you feel awful and does awful things to you until you get cured. We have treatments now that are barely noticeable by the patient, treatments that they can do at home, treatments that will treat even advanced cancers without needing to have them have the patients be completely debilitated. And that's continuing to advance. And then the newest thing is now being able to predict, to a certain extent, which patients need chemotherapy and which ones don't. So again, you're sort of limiting less doing more for patients. And I think that's really the big advance. Before it was always about what's the maximum we can do.
Yeah.
Now it's really about what is the minimum we can do, but get the greatest benefit.
Gotcha.
And that's a huge change, I think, for patients.
She's Dr. Dortha Chu from City of Hope. She's the breast surgeon over at City of Hope. You can learn more at cityofhope.org/Santa Clarita if you want to learn about their Santa Clarita facilities right here on Valencia Boulevard across from City Hall. Is breast cancer one of those? Because I know with I believe, I can't remember what doctor it was. We had quite a few on the City of Hope show, but we were talking prostate cancer, and there's kind of different types of prostate cancer. Is it the same deal with breast cancer, where there's different types of breast cancer, not necessarily just stage 1, 2, 3, 4, but different types of cancer itself?
Yes. Cancers can arise out of any cell of the body. Just some are more commonly can devolve into a cancer than others. So in the breast, we talk about the ductal system as being sort of the majority of the cancers arise out of the lining for the ducts. And then there's a small percentage that arises out of the lobular component, which is actually the part that makes milk, so to speak. And then there's some other sort of, rare types that just arise out of the connective tissue, the skin. I mean, you name it, it can turn into a cancer. But the majority of breast cancers that we see arise out of the ductal system. That makes it a little bit more predictable. But even within that, there are differences. There are some that are more aggressive than others, and we are able to identify what some of those factors are to help us predict, both in terms of treatment options that are appropriate, that would work the best, as well as, to a certain degree, limit the side effects, because we can be more selective because of these tests that we can do now.
So let's get into the tests now. We were talking before the show started about some big news with regards to genetic testing.
Yes.
So maybe break that down for me.
Sure. So genetic testing, we can, we have to be very specific in terms of what we're talking about. There's genetic testing of the patient, so this is what you're born with.
Okay.
And then there's genomic testing, or genetic testing for the cancer, but fancy term, genomic.
All right, noted.
To
I'm
try
going to use that at my next dinner party.
just to kind of distinguish it,
Yeah.
to try to distinguish it between the genetic tests that people think of, like the breast cancer gene, for example, that we hear about in the news. This is more about the actual genes of the cancer itself. So one of those advances, as I've discussed, is that we've now started to kind of decipher and understand the steps that go from that a cancer cell becomes a cancer cell. And along those ways, there are certain genes that get mutated, and that pushes them into gaining the ability to be a cancer cell. And for breast specifically, there's now a panel of these genes that have been identified. And depending on which of those genes your particular cancer may have, it gives us a clue as to how aggressive it is. So aggressive both in terms of, is it one of those that's going to be earlier to start traveling and go to other sites instead of staying in the breast? Is it more likely to hide from some of the therapies that we have available? Or can we actually then use that and target those particular steps and those particular genes and use it to our advantage, so that only the cells that are mutated will be affected by a treatment, and cells that are completely normal will not.
Oh, wow.
So those are the kinds of things that these kinds of genetic or genomic tests have allowed us to start deciphering. We've known about these for a while. I mean, this is not something that happened overnight, of course.
Yeah.
It took a while to develop these genes and identify them. But the big news that recently came out, and we're all very excited about, is that one of the tests that has been around for a little while has now been taken one step further and really have demonstrated its effectiveness in being able to predict which women with breast cancer will benefit from additional chemotherapy in addition to hormonal therapy, despite or in spite of whatever stage they happen to present, with the exception being stage 4, which is widely metastatic. That one's, of course, a little different. We're still talking about relatively limited disease here. But there was a time when we thought everybody needed chemo. So it didn't matter what stage you were.
Yeah,
because
I remember, I remember my grandmother went through
Mm-hmm.
chemotherapy also.
Yes.
And that was just, and before, honestly, before being a part of this show, I thought that was still the only way it was surgery and chemotherapy.
Absolutely.
That's it.
And to be honest, again, there was a time when we went from surgery alone, because there was no chemotherapy, to adding chemotherapy because we had chemotherapy, and so everybody got chemotherapy, to now where we can be selective about who actually needs chemotherapy.
Yeah.
And chemotherapy, even in quotes, which chemotherapy. So we can actually drill down to which agents would be best for you. The advantage to all of that is not just, oh yay, we can do all this, but really what's important for patients to understand when we can start getting this precise is that then the patient herself may not need to undergo treatment that not only may not be effective to begin with, and so they have all the toxicities, all the side effects from the chemotherapy, and really didn't gain a whole lot of benefit. And so now we can actually pick out which treatments might be the best for them, so that yes, they may still have to have side effects, but now they understand what the benefits are. And then the flip side is the patient who got chemotherapy who never needed it in the first place. Yeah. So if they had a relatively lazy cancer or a less aggressive cancer, then the hormonal therapy that's been available for years may be completely enough to keep that cancer from coming back, to the point where even if they wanted to get chemotherapy, that additional treatment doesn't add anything. So again, the point is you're going through all this toxicity and side effects, but you didn't gain any benefit. So before we just sort of said, it's the luck of the draw.
You have cancer, let's hope it works.
Let's just hope it works. And if you happen to have side effects, that's just the price you pay.
Yeah.
Well, now with this test, we can be better at advising a patient what she would benefit from and avoid certain toxicities.
Yeah.
And so it's huge because this potentially, if you look at numbers and people who kind of crunch numbers, say potentially 3/4 of the women that are diagnosed now will be able to avoid chemotherapy because of this test, some sort of in that ballpark. And that's huge.
And chemotherapy, correct me if I'm wrong, but it takes a toll.
It does.
Is it like all types of chemotherapy? Because like you said, quote, chemotherapy, there's different types of chemotherapy with regards to what medicine it is.
Sure.
But it's a pretty heavy toll on somebody, right?
It can. We are better with some of our agents. And chemotherapy, again, is one of those sort of generic terms that encompasses a lot of different things. And so depending on the specific medication or medicine combination, the side effect panels change. But, there are some things that are standard that you sort of, everybody just need to expect it if you're going to do chemotherapy. Hair loss is one of them. Although it is very rarely permanent, it is still physically a very devastating thing to go through. GI symptoms, nausea, vomiting, etc. I mean, that's still part and parcel. Some people find that they taste things differently, so their appetite changes. So then that affects, how you live life. Food is an important thing for us. And then there's other toxicities. Their immune system may get compromised. They may have trouble clotting. And so there are some other things that can go with that. Now, most of those are short-lived, and once you're off therapy, they come back. There are some things that don't. You can get neuropathy, which is nerve damage. So patients report their hands and feet turn numb. Or have sort of that prickly feeling like they fall asleep, which again, most of the time, fortunately, is short term. It recovers, but some people don't, and that's permanent. Some people find that their muscle pains, ache, bone ache, things like that doesn't always return. That doesn't always go away and return to normal. For women, fertility could be an issue. If you're younger and you were premenopausal before, and there was a possibility that you may have wanted to add to your family or even start a family, well, a lot of the chemotherapy agents will render you infertile essentially afterwards, or send you into menopause, and that limits your options. So majority of women still do very well, and I would say most of our patients these days actually go through chemotherapy with relatively ease compared to even 15-20 years ago. But these are still side effects that they need to expect. So it's hard, and it's hard because when I see a patient like that, on the one hand, we always say, well, yay, everybody's happy, you lived, your cancer hopefully will stay gone, and that is something to be celebrated. But it will affect the rest of their life.
Yeah, there's some lifestyle changes for sure.
And so it's nice if we can avoid some of that for patients, especially if it's not going to be effective to begin with.
Yeah. I believe it. She's Dortha Chu. She is from the City of Hope. She's the breast surgeon at City of Hope. And we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to talk more with Mandy Eglseder and Dortha Chu on the City of Hope show on your hometown station, KHTS.
The best live theater can be found right here in the Santa Clarita Valley. The Canyon Theater Guild has been entertaining audiences for decades with top-quality musicals and plays. Located on Main Street in Old Town Newhall, CTG also offers workshops for the young actor in your family. For more information, call the box office at 799-2702 or go online to canyontheater.org.
If you're tired of your nail polish chipping a day or two after an expensive manicure, then you'll love the gel nail polish manicure now offered by Ann. Ann is a licensed manicurist serving the Santa Clarita Valley in Canyon Country for over 15 years. And now she's offering the gel manicure that lasts without chipping for up to 2 weeks. Log on to hometownstation.com for details on how to get an amazing deal on gel nails by Ann on Restaurant Row, or call Ann at 250-8340.
They've been making us dance since the 60s. It's the Rock and Roll Hall of Famers, Ronnie Spector and the Ronettes, coming to Santa Clarita on Friday, August 3rd at the Canyon Club in the Westfield Valencia Town Center. Ronnie Spector and the Ronettes, singing their string of classic hits from the top of the Billboard charts, and featuring our one and only local singing sensation, Savannah Burrows. Savannah Burrows and the Ronettes. Ronnie Spector and the Ronettes. And Savannah Burrows on Friday, August 3rd at the Canyon Club in the Westfield Valencia Town Center. Tickets at Ticketmaster.
Mission Valley Bank is a commercial bank in the Santa Clarita Valley that really puts the community into community banking.
At Mission Valley Bank, we strive to be a trusted advisor to our clients, and that means being an integral part of the communities we serve. We started the Give Where You Live program to help bring awareness to our nonprofit partners. We're more than just a local business bank. In fact, we're a full-service, independent commercial bank that is locally owned, community-minded, and relationship-driven. I'm Tamara Gurney, President and CEO of Mission Valley Bank, and I invite you to experience the Mission Valley Bank difference, where your success is our mission. We want to be your most valued bank.
Mission Valley Bank has been named Most Trusted Advisor Business Banker by the San Fernando Valley Business Journal 5 years in a row, and received the Business Leadership Award by the Santa Clarita Valley Chamber of Commerce, Valley Industry Association, and SCV Economic Development Corporation. Visit them at their Center Point branch location or at missionvalleybank.com. Member FDIC.
Hey, this is Ellen Kay, and did you know Eglseder More Than Urgent Care is open daily in Stevenson Ranch? Eglseder is the ER alternative that's built and staffed by ER doctors. With on-site lab, x-ray, and pharmacy, Eglseder has more medical services than a typical clinic. Walk in and be seen in minutes. Open 7 days a week from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. For more information, just go to exederurgentcare.com. That's EXERurgentcare.com.
At City of Hope, we don't believe the future can wait for the future. For over a century, we've been advancing science that saves lives. From 4 of the world's top cancer-fighting drugs to the development of synthetic human insulin. We are maximizing the potential of immunotherapy and making precision medicine a reality. It's not enough to promise future cures for cancer. We must find them sooner. We are the miracle of science with soul. Find out more at cityofhope.org.
Your hometown station.
I can change the world. I will be the sunlight in your universe. You would think my love was really something good. Baby, if I could change the world.
Santa Clarita's hometown station, KHTS, 98.1 FM and AM 1220. This is the City of Hope show on your hometown station. cityofhope.org for more information on the local Santa Clarita facility right across from City Hall on Valencia Boulevard near Citrus. And next to that's that medical building right by Bank of America there in Santa Clarita. One of the great organizations here in the Santa Clarita Valley. We've been talking with Dortha Chu and Mandy Eglseder from the City of Hope. And we've talking Dortha Chu. She is the Dr. Dortha Chu. Excuse me. You went to medical school, so you deserve throw that in there. Yeah. And so we've been talking about breast cancer and different things and some of the genetic testings that has come out with this, and ultimately with all of this, the goal is, you talked about this at the beginning, but the goal is to not do. It's going to sound weird, but not do the most you can, but the least you can to help the patients, right?
Yeah.
And
the less is more.
Less is more in terms of it, because there's big things if you just jump right into chemo without doing any testing. There's lifestyle changes that could help hurt the patients in the future.
Yes, well, absolutely. And I think because breast cancer is one of those, as I mentioned before, we've had some great successes in certain areas of cancer, not all of them, but certainly some. And breast cancer is one that we've really had one of the greatest successes with in terms of getting patients alive, surviving their cancer, both a combination of treatment options, which we've talked a little bit about earlier, but also diagnostics. I mean, we've just gotten so much better at finding these cancers earlier in women and getting women tested. I think that's the other sort of end of it, which is screening. If we hadn't really been as successful with getting women screened and getting their mammograms and finding these cancers earlier, I don't think our survival rate would be as high because that's the case it is with other cancers that we don't have good screening tests for. So I think there's a reason for that success on that level as well. But these days, because we're catching the cancers earlier, patients are surviving their cancers, and we're talking decades. We're not talking 5 years just to survive. Yeah. We're talking decades, living their normal lifespan, basically. We want to try to give them that quality of life as much as possible. So it used to be, just survive the cancer. That's the most important thing. And it always is the most important thing, is getting a cure. But now we can look beyond that and say, well, we know you're going to get a cure. Yeah. So now how can we make the rest of your life, hopefully, just as good as this half of your life? And that's where a lot of these sort of treatments and narrowing things down and refining and really tailoring it to the patient's needs and their particular cancer can help, because then some of the side effects that we talked about, if it can be avoided, then they live a better life. And if it cannot be avoided, at least you know what that trade-off is. Like I said, it's one thing to say, "Oh, I'm just glad to be alive, and I can live with whatever happens." But it just gives you a little bit more security knowing this was the best option for you, and so those risk factors and those side effects may be more worthwhile, so to speak.
Research is a big thing for City of Hope. How involved are you with research? Are you involved in it? I don't know. Some doctors are more involved than others, but are you involved at all in doing some research?
I'm not personally, because a choice.
Yeah.
I very much personally just enjoy the treatment side of it a lot more. But yes, absolutely, research is a huge part of what we do as an organization, and I'm very proud to be a part of that. I used to do a lot of research, so it helps to be connected to it as well. But no, on our main campus, most of it's done on the main campus because of resources. And so we have very basic scientific research going on where we're looking at the actual biology of cancer. So something literally so removed from the treatment part. We're just looking at understanding all the way to clinical trials where they're actively looking at treatment options and refining them for not just breast, but multiple other cancers.
So can you explain a little bit, because sometimes we get into the weeds a little bit, but for those who don't know, a clinical trial, what is a clinical trial? Because we say that a lot, and City of Hope does a lot of clinical trials, but what specifically is a clinical trial?
Good question. So when we refer to a clinical trial, what we're usually referring to is its treatment option or treatment plan that is not the currently accepted standard of care. So the currently adopted treatment option that's sort of approved for everyone. And the idea being that we're trying to determine if there's some other factor, whether it's another medication or another treatment or a change in the way we deliver a medication. So it can be any kind of change in terms of a deviation from, again, the standard therapy. So in other words, if you come in with a cancer diagnosis, a breast cancer diagnosis, let's say, and based on what that information is, there's going to be a treatment plan offered to you that's going to be based on what we already know. So whether that's a combination of surgery, radiation, medicine, whatever it might entail. But it may be that because of your age or because of the some of the nuances that's different about your cancer, where the standard treatment maybe isn't exactly the you don't fit the perfect mold.
Okay.
And so there may be then the thought is, well, if we had another option that might be better, would you have been a better candidate? And that's where we need to look at those other alternative options. But we need to look at it in a very controlled way. You can't just sort of have random doctors say, hey, you know
just
what?
Go for it.
For you, I'd
Let's
like
add
to
some
do
Advil
this.
to it or something.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And because then there's no way to know, is it helpful? Is it not? Is it just the individual person that it happened to help?
Yeah.
Or is it something we can apply to others? And so a clinical trial is a way to sort of formalize that so that we can set down the ground rules and say, okay, this is exactly what we're going to look at. This is the exact treatment we're going to look at. And this is how we're going to figure out, is it better or worse compared to what we already know?
Okay.
So it's in a very controlled environment. So when you participate in a clinical study, you are not, you're not going to be sort of ignored.
Yeah.
You are going to be followed very,
Okay.
very closely, and you have to be prepared for that. So there's a lot more monitoring. Some of the treatments may not be exactly what you read, in the little textbooks or pamphlets.
Yeah.
And it takes a little bit more sort of a leap of faith to do that. These days, most clinical trials, especially again for breast, because we have such good established treatment, most of the clinical trials are looking at treatments that's really for patients who have who fall outside of the standard in terms of whatever their disease is or their or the stage that they come in at, because the established treatments are so good.
Okay.
But that's really the purpose of the clinical trial, is to take what's already known, but just change it enough so that we know if there's something better. Is what we think, if we tweak that, it's going to make it better. We need to prove that it's better.
Yeah.
But it needs to be in a controlled setting.
And that's based on the research that's been done through extensive research that's been done. She's Dortha Chu. She is the breast surgeon at City of Hope. You go to cityofhope.org to learn more information about the Santa Clarita facility and the great organization that is the City of Hope. So cityofhope.org to learn more. When should, and this is maybe later. Actually, we'll talk about that later. I've just changed my mind. One of the big things is immunotherapy. Yes. We talked about this. What is it? How does it apply to breast cancer? Does it apply to breast cancer? Does it apply to only certain kinds of cancer? What is immunotherapy? And is it? I don't know if popular is the right term, but it's certainly in the news.
Yes, it's actually a very, very exciting avenue right now for treatment. So briefly, what happens with cancer is that somewhere along the line, when the normal cell starts to change and it starts to change down toward this pathway becoming a cancer, typically our body's immune system, one of its functions, in addition to fighting infections that we all know about, one of its actual functions is to surveillance the body for these kinds of funny changes and get rid of them, so that you don't get cancers every 5 minutes. But certain cancers, depending on their developmental process, has learned or has gained an ability to shut down the immune system. At least to the extent so that the immune system doesn't recognize it as being a problem. So it just sort of ignores it and tricks it. Exactly. Okay. And so while it doesn't shut off your entire immune system, it just shuts off enough of it so that it just basically ignores the cancer and allows the cancer to continue to grow. And that's been a big mystery to us for a very long time in terms of what are those signals? Like how does it turn it off selectively? So again, it doesn't turn off your entire immune system, but just some part of it. And so how does that happen? Well, in the last 10, 15 years, again, just the advances in genetic research and biochemical research has really allowed us to start drilling down and identifying some of these signals that a cancer cell can actually produce that acts like an off switch and turns off certain types of immune cells that are critical in recognizing cancer in the body. And so because it shuts it off, the body just then ignores the cancer. So by identifying the off signals, now we can figure out a way to turn it back on, is basically what it boils down to. So whether it's a way of sort of getting rid of that blocking agent, whatever that might be, and sort of act like a little vacuum that kind of sucks it up wherever it's be, so it never delivers a signal, or it somehow goes back to those cells that have been shut off and basically manually turn them back on again, so to speak. So now all of a sudden it recognizes these cancer cells as being foreign and be able to get rid of them. So there's sort of different ways of using our immune system. So again, whether to prevent it from getting deactivated or to reactivate it. It's sort of the kind of process we look at. And so there have been, in the last 5 years or so, some new agents that have been developed that will allow us to do that. And it works very well. And it worked very well in certain cancers. Lung is one of them. And now it's becoming available as part of our standard treatment. So there's ads on the news papers and on TV and talking about immunotherapy. And I'm sure some of our listeners have seen these ads. They're all over the place. And it's very exciting because it does work very well. It turns your immune system back on so that it helps in that process. It's not the only thing, of course, but it certainly gives a big jolt of our ability to fight off a lot of these more complicated cancers that traditionally have been a very difficult thing to treat, like lung cancer, and offering patients hope of living longer and increased chance of getting a cure. And so it's very exciting. But what patients need to understand is that when we develop new drugs and when we develop new therapies, it often starts as being very targeted toward one particular cancer.
Okay, that was my question. Yes. Is it specific to like lung cancer or something like that?
Initially, it is, because you have to start somewhere. You can't just say, well, is it going to treat all cancers? Because it's too complicated. Because a breast cancer cell is still fundamentally different than a lung cancer cell. So there isn't a magic bullet that can hit both right off the bat.
You should make that.
I feel like you should. We're getting there.
Okay.
So we're getting there. But
I'm not a doctor, but I think you should. That'd be awesome to get a magic bullet.
Wouldn't it?
Yeah.
That's been sort of the holy grail of finding that one little magic bullet that can hit all cancers at all times. We're not quite there, although immunotherapy, some would argue, might be that magic bullet down the line. But we have to start somewhere, and so it usually starts with the more difficult cancers because they're the ones that have less optimal treatment, and so you sort of want to hit those first. And lung being one of the ones that we haven't been as successful as breast. So there have been some that have been developed, and they work very, very well. And so once they've been shown to work well in one cancer, and if it's one of these sort of a little bit more of a generic function of a cell, so this is not necessarily specific to lung, then we can start broadening it and applying it and testing it. And this is where the clinical trials come in, is using these medicines now in patients with other types of cancers to see if they work in other types of cancers. So kind of going back to our clinical trial, for example, this would be an example where, let's say a patient comes in with breast cancer, and there again, they have some treatments that are current that's being offered to them, but they may have something a little different about, again, whatever their particular cancer is, that would make the standard treatment maybe not quite as perfect or as ideal as we want. And so maybe they would want to explore a clinical trial where this is an option, where they're going to be given the standard treatment, but in addition, they'll receive an immuno treatment and see if that immunotherapy works in addition to the standard. So that would be in the clinical, that would be potentially in the clinical trial setting, because right now the medication is approved for lung cancer because we've had the trials to show it works, but not yet for breast because we don't know if it works or not. So the clinical trials are ongoing now for breast, for example, for a lot of these newer immunotherapies. So the exact immunotherapies that you see advertised for lung cancer, they are not yet available and applicable to breast as a standard treatment, or any other cancer in a standard treatment. But they are starting to be looked at in clinical trial settings. So there's something to be explored if you are in a situation where that might apply to you. The idea, of course, is that we think it's going to be applicable because they are targeting something not specific to lung cancer, but really how the immune system functions. So at least on paper, you would think, well, it should turn it back on the same way. But we have to make sure of that. Because even with immunotherapy, which is fabulous as a treatment, there is no such thing as a completely risk-free medication or treatment.
So that was my question. Is the immunotherapy, what does that do in terms of side effects?
Good question. The good news is most of the side effects are limited. And so a lot of the ones that we think of for traditional chemotherapy, like nausea, vomiting, hair loss, etc., are oftentimes not part of the picture because they don't attack those cells, or they don't do anything with those particular cell types. But they do affect the immune system. And yes, we talk about turning it back on, but there are some not so great side effects of turning, sort of heightening your immune system.
Getting your immune system super immune.
Exactly.
Kind of
kind of revs it up a little bit. And so again, these are still, as great as they are, they're still pretty big sort of shotgun pellets, and not really, sort of rifles and or sniper bullets where you're really targeting. So you still get sort of a scatter effect. So there are still going to be other things that are not so great. So if you rev the immune system up too much, for example, you can start to get it to attack the actual regular part of the body. And so you can get things like nausea, vomiting again because it attacks the gut. You might be at high risk for certain types of infections because again it attacks differently. So there's a different sort of side effect profile for these medications. Again, generally less than what you would think of for your more traditional chemotherapies, but certainly not zero. So you don't want to just sort of say, hey, let's just give it to everybody because we have it, but you want to make sure it works. Again, it goes back to we want to make sure it works, but with the least amount of side effects, because it doesn't help if we kill the patient before the cure takes place, right?
Exactly.
So it's still experimental for most other cancers, but certainly for the ones like lung and some of the more advanced colorectal, these have shown great promise. Leukemias is one of them. I think actually our institution just was one of the instrumental ones to come up with one of these types of treatments for leukemia, and which again we're very proud of. So I think it's there. It's so tantalizingly out of reach for all the other cancers, but it's a really great promise for treatment for patients.
When you say, again, we're speaking with Dortha Chu. She's Dr. Dortha Chu. She is from City of Hope. She's the breast surgeon over at City of Hope, talking about treatments and different genetic advancements with regards to cancer research and trials and different treatments as well. What is in my mind is that cancer is cancer, but that's not necessarily the case, because you're talking about how this works for lung cancer, but breast cancer, it may not work for it. So what I think is weird to me is that I think of cancer as just like a lump of bad stuff that's on your lungs, and it's on your breast, or it's on your calf, or whatever, but that's not the case. And for each different type, you need a different type of treatment.
It does because the word cancer, or sort of with a capital C, really encompasses a very wide range of what happens in the body. So what makes something a cancer is basically a cell that has gained three abilities that a normal cell doesn't do.
Okay.
The first one is that it continues to grow indefinitely. Almost every other cell in the body knows when to stop.
Okay.
So, we don't continually get bigger brains or
Yeah.
bigger lungs through life.
Yeah,
it
ask
knows
my
that
wife.
something.
Yeah, no kidding.
I know, unfortunately,
Yeah.
right? And so, by and large, the things in our body, once it grows to a certain size, it knows to stay that size. I mean, there's some turnover and renewal, but it basically stays that size. And so, there's a signal that controls when cells sort of know when to stop. Cancer cells don't.
Okay.
They sort of ignore that signal, and they just keep growing. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that they can travel. So if I were to take a little piece of breast, normal breast, and put it in your thigh, it would just basically shrivel away because it would go, this is not where I belong. It would know that, and it would just go away, just disappear. But if I took a breast cancer and put it in your thigh, it wouldn't care. It would be like, oh, look, this is nice. It's as good a home as any, and it'll just continue to grow.
Okay.
And it can travel there on its own. That's sort of the key. And so it doesn't care where it is, and it can travel anywhere. The third thing that it does is wherever it happens to settle, whether it's in its original home, so to speak, or somewhere else, it destroys the tissue around it. And that's really the problem for most people. And as far as cancer is concerned, it's the destruction, because then it destroys the normal tissue. And if it happens to be in a part that is essential for life, like the lung, the liver, then you have a problem.
Yeah.
And that's where patients, unfortunately, don't survive their cancer, is really those issues. If I just have something that grows indefinitely in the breast and doesn't do any other damage, it doesn't matter. We have benign things that do that, and it doesn't matter. But if you have something that's going to destroy that tissue, or even, God forbid, go to the brain or liver or lungs or your bones and destroy those parts, then we have a problem. So cancer is anything that has gained those three abilities, and it can start in any normal cell in the body. The difference is, how does it go from a normal cell to a cancer cell and gain those three abilities? That's where the mystery lies in that particular cancer. And everybody's is unique. This is the other thing that's hard.
Every
to
person,
understand.
every human who
person,
has it.
every cancer is unique in that respect. What makes your normal breast cell become a breast cancer in you is going to be unique to you. So there's no way for us to ever know all the millions of steps that it took to get from a normal cell to a cancer cell. So that's not the goal. What we're trying to figure out is, are there big steps that are common to all the cancers? So if we look at my analogy of sort of, these three traits, when does the switch completely get turned off, where the cell doesn't care if it stops or not? Where's that final switch?
Yeah.
We just need the final switch. If we can figure out where to stop that final switch so the cell can be turned off and they can die, well, that's going to be helpful. It doesn't matter what type of cancer you have. If we can figure out what allows it to travel and be able to block it before it has the ability to travel, well, that's going to be very helpful.
Yeah.
Because, again, locally we can fix that as long as it doesn't go anywhere else.
Yeah.
What's allowing it to eat away at the cells around that? Is it releasing a chemical? Is it the cell itself that's toxic? Or is it causing the immune system to attack? Whatever is the mechanism, if we can figure that out, that could be a step that we can intervene. So that's the problem with sort of cancer, sort of coming up with a cure for cancer. It's not that it's impossible. It's just that it is impossible because of the fact that every cancer is unique. So every person is unique. So if you look at it that perspective, we're never going to get a cure. Yeah. But that's not the point. What we look for are big things. And we are making big steps towards that. So in that degree, it's not impossible to find a cure for cancer, because if we can identify those major steps, and immunotherapy is a very big step in the recent years. But are we going to find, every way to block every single cancer from growing? No, that's impossible. Okay. But can we figure out a way to stop the majority of them? Yes, I think that's going to happen, and I think we're winning that war.
She's Dr. Dortha Chu. We're going to take a quick break. This is the City of Hope Show on your hometown station, KHTS. We're going to wrap things up on the City of Hope Show. cityofhope.org for more information about their Santa Clarita facilities are on Valencia Boulevard, right across from City Hall in that medical building next to Bank of America. Quick break. More on the way next.
Looking for a new fun activity for your son or daughter? If you are, then visit Ice Station Valencia and get your child started in ice skating. The Ice Station Skating Academy offers classes for all ages and skill levels. A skating academy enrollment is also a great gift for any child. A new semester starts every 2 months, so it's never too late to sign up. Ice Station is located across the street from Valencia High School. Call 775-8686 or check icestation.net for more ice skating fun.
At City of Hope, we don't believe the future can wait for the future. For over a century, we've been advancing science that saves lives. From 4 of the world's top cancer-fighting drugs to the development of synthetic human insulin. We are maximizing the potential of immunotherapy and making precision medicine a reality. It's not enough to promise future cures for cancer. We must find them sooner. We are the miracle of science with soul. Find out more at cityofhope.org.
Little Eye Leaders is the newest preschool in the Santa Clarita Valley. At Little Eye Leaders, our outstanding teachers lead with intellect, perspective, and heart. That means our programs provide a warm, nurturing atmosphere to meet the unique needs of each child. We believe that play is a powerful form of learning for young children. That's why our kids have every opportunity to learn through the magic and excitement of play. Parents, schedule a tour today by calling 303-0400 or online at littleeyeleaders.org.
Accessor Technology is holding an interview event on August 3rd, 4th, and 5th at Westfield Valencia Town Center. You'll have an opportunity to support Accessor's award-winning ride queuing solution. We're hiring 65-plus entry-level cashiers and ride attendants to work on-site at the Flash Pass operations at Six Flags Magic Mountain. Enjoy flexible hours and free park passes on your days off. Apply now at summerparkjobs.com. Meet our team at the Westfield Valencia Town Center the first weekend of August. Who said work can't be fun?
Hey guys, this is Cardinellis, host of the new show Problem Solver Politics, an independent political talk show that keeps you up to date and in the latest political happenings, both nationally and here in the Santa Clarita Valley. Now, this isn't your usual partisan political talk show. At Problem Solver Politics, we have both Democrats, Republicans, and Libertarians hash out their differences on air as we strive to find solutions to today's challenges. Join us Sundays at 7 p.m. for Problem Solver Politics.
Men, are you feeling tired, stressed, or just don't have the energy you used to? Did you know this could be related to decreased testosterone levels? Luckily, there's a safe, effective solution. Weeder Prime helps support healthy testosterone levels with clinically tested key ingredients. Just 2 capsules of Weeder Prime each day can help change your mood, energy, focus, body fat, and lean muscle. Feel the way you felt 10, 20, even 30 years ago. Rediscover your Prime with Weeder Prime. To find a retailer near you, visit WeederPrime.com. That's WEIDER Prime.com.
Your hometown station.
I can change the world. I need the sunlight in your universe.
Santa Clarita's hometown station, KHTS. This is the City of Hope show. cityofhope.org to learn more information about City of Hope here in the Santa Clarita Valley. So make sure you go to cityofhope.org. We are also streaming live at facebook.com/KHTS radio. So if you're missing anything, you're driving in your car, make sure you tune in. We go back to Facebook on KHTS radio. I want to ask this. We only have about 3 minutes here, but I wanted to ask you, when Dortha Chu, by the way, is in studio. Mandy Eglseder's here too, and we've talked about some of the different treatments and stuff for breast cancer. But I wanted to ask you, in closing, like I said, only a few minutes here, but when should people start getting the checkups and maybe doing self-checks and things like that? When should that happen for individuals?
Sure. So again, great question. There's been a lot of changes recently in terms of recommendations from various organizations. The American Cancer Society has a set of recommendations. The U.S. Task Force on Preventive Care also has a bunch of different recommendations. So it gets very confusing. The goal, honestly, is just making people more aware. So regardless of which one you choose to follow in terms of guidelines, I think as long as you follow at least one of them, I think it puts you in good shape. But if you're asking my opinion in terms of what I would recommend, I think for every woman, you should be an advocate for your own health. And that should start with having an honest conversation with your doctor, whether that's your primary care doctor or your gynecologist, to kind of go through your whole gynecological history, your hormonal history, your family history, so that we can actually go through a true risk assessment. Are you truly a high-risk patient, or are you at regular risk? Just because you're a woman, we all carry a 10% lifetime risk. Can't get away from that.
Yeah.
But do you have any other risk beyond that? And depending on that, then you can talk about what is the appropriate screening for you. So for just a regular patient, a woman, just for being a woman, my recommendation is, I think a self-exam is wonderful to do, and you should do it once a month, preferably at the end of your period or when your period is over, when your hormone levels are at their lowest. The idea is not for you to find anything. That's not your job.
That's the goal.
But the idea is for you to monitor your own breasts so that you know what they look like and feel like that's, quote, normal for you. So that if something were to change, that's what you need to alert
Knowing
your
the
doctor.
difference, that's what.
Yes,
yeah.
exactly. The change is what's important. That should prompt you to go get checked. If you are 40 or older, I think you should start thinking about doing a mammogram once a year. If you skip a year and you're low risk, you're probably fine. But at the very least, start to get into the habit of trying to get in the habit of doing a mammogram once a year. Right now, that is still our best test. MRI, ultrasounds, these are supplementals that might be considered in the individual case. But right now, as a general rule, mammogram is still the best. Certainly after 50, I do recommend that you do one every year. So between 40 and 50, try to do it every year if you can, or at least every other year. But certainly by age 50, you should be doing it every year. We recommend every year until the age of 70. Now, 70 is sort of it's just a cutoff. It's just a number. I think if you're healthy and you're living a great life, as most of our patients these days do, then there is no cutoff age for doing a mammogram as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
Do one every year. And if something comes up, again, the earlier I find it, I can still fix that. And you can still have another 15, 20, 30 years. Who knows? So there is no cutoff. But again, it's one of those decisions that you should make with your regular doctor. So the key is having that honest conversation with your doctor, and so you can really get a good assessment of your risk. Then you can go from there.
Doctor, thank you for coming in. Always a pleasure having you in. Mandy, good to see you again.
See you as
Congrats on your being betrothed now.
Thank you.
Yeah, which is a very fancy term. I know. This has been the City of Hope show on your hometown station, KHTS 98.1 FM and AM 1220. cityofhope.org for more information about their organization and about their Santa Clarita facilities on Valencia Boulevard across from City Hall. That does it for the City of Hope show on your hometown station.